All right, pre-algebra lesson 10.4, graphing data. So we're going to look at aspects, some of the graphs for graphing data. Of course, we've already looked at stem and leaf plot. We've looked at broken line graphs. We've looked at histograms. And so now today we want to look at some other aspects of graphing data. All right, so this is lesson 10.4. And number one, different kinds of graphs are used to illustrate different aspects of the data. Right? Data, it depends on what the data is as to which graph you would want to use. They all have their purposes. All right, in the graphs we're going to look at today, a clear descriptive title is very important. The way I look at graphs is this. You want somebody to be able to look at your graph and be able to understand what the graph is about, what it represents, what the data is. That should all come from a look at the graph. There shouldn't have to be any other information given to allow someone to understand exactly what your graph represents. And so a clear descriptive title is very important. I can't believe how many times students forget to put a title on their graph. Don't do that. You always want a clear descriptive title. B, the viewer should be able to understand the graph without any or very little other written instruction. All right, and that's what I just got done mentioning to you. They should be able to understand the graph. All right, really, 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 really key. All right, let's take a look at our first one here. And actually, let me move this shade off here. And you can see we've got our first graph here. And this is called a, do you know what this one is called? Any idea what kind of graph that is? This is a bar graph. A bar graph, very, very common, used all the time. And a bar graph is used to show a comparison of quantities. Comparison of quantities or amounts in a specific category. I like this graph. It's a pretty good one. We've got a descriptive title. What is it? Adult unemployment in the Nordic countries, 2008. All right, that's pretty clear. We're talking about unemployment. We're talking about Nordic countries, Sweden, Finland, etc. And we're even given year, so that's a nice descriptive title. I want you to notice some other things here. Notice labeling of the axis. We have the horizontal axis, which is right here, right? And it's clearly labeled. It's labeled with country. So, all right, here are those Nordic countries: Denmark, Finland, Iceland, Norway, and Sweden. Very, very clearly labeled. Okay, and that's important. Then also, if you look on this axis, the y-axis, then you've got a label there as well, unemployment rate. By the way, please take note of the direction of the text. This is the proper way to write vertical text, and that is for the orientation to go that way. You would not write it this way. That would be the wrong way to write your text, okay? It does orient the way that it is, and so that's important. We've got a scale, starts at 0. You've got increments, and they're clearly marked, and we now can understand that we're in, the unemployment rate is in a percent because the percent symbol is listed there. All right, I'll mention some other things when we take a look at our next bar graph. One other thing, and I like this, bar graphs have begun to do this, and I think it's a very good thing to do, and that is to put the totals on top of each bar. That makes it very readable at a quick glance. And obviously you can see now we're able to compare the data, right? At a moment's notice, I can say which country had the highest unemployment rate, and you should easily say, oh, well, the bar for Finland is the highest, so Finland had the highest. Lowest, you're looking for the lowest bar. Norway had the lowest. So that's the aspect of a bar graph. You get an easy comparison. Hey, you can compare Denmark, Finland, Iceland, Norway, and Sweden, and be able to determine the aspect of the data. All right, so that's our first example. Let's go to a second example here. A little bit different kind of bar graph. And we do have a title. We've got fruit sales. So the title of this is fruit sales. I would have preferred a little bit more descriptive title. I have no idea when, where, what, but I do know it is fruit sales. Now, this key down here is not necessary. That's not necessary. Some graphs, if you use Microsoft Word or some other programs, a lot of times there are templates already built in, and they would want to do something like that. Why would I say that they're not necessary? Because we're labeled right here. We are labeled right here. And so apples, bananas, grapes, oranges, pears are labeled right there, and so not necessary. Let me mention a few other things, because again, this is a template, and so it's a little bit off. Generally, you would not have a mark there in the middle of a bar. Generally, your marks would be there, and apples would be in between, and your marks would be here, and bananas would be in between, etc. Is really the correct way to illustrate a bar graph. And so that's a little bit off. In actuality, the first example was a little bit off there as well. Again, as you look for examples, they're a little bit hard to find. Now notice here, I'm going to go back to the first one. Notice here we do have these marks. Normally what would happen with a bar graph is you would have the bar filling up the whole area between the lines, and it would fill the whole area. Now, a histogram, one bar would be right next to another. Normally, for a bar graph, you would skip one whole block and then do your next bar. Skip a block, do your next bar. Skip a block, do your next bar. But notice how the name, the title, the description, the label is between the two lines, and that's the way it should be for a bar graph. Okay, let's go back down to our fruit sales again here. And so again, we're told the fruit is the bottom axis, and we're told which fruit is what color, what bar, and then on the right we have sales, and it just says sum. All right, I don't know if the sales is in dollars, kroner, euros, pesos. We don't really know. That's not great. I would have labeled that better. I would have been more descriptive on my label of that. One other thing this bar graph does not do is does not give you totals. So again, it would be so much better if there was a 40 there, if there would have been a 60 there, a 30 there, a 50 there, and a 25 there. Okay. My preference, excuse me, for a bar graph is to have the totals on top of the bars. It just makes your bar graph more valuable. Again, what do you want to do with a graph? You want someone to just at a glance be able to understand your graph and be able to get the aspects that you want them to know. I can clearly see that bananas had the greatest amount of sales, and I could clearly see that pears had the least amount of sales, right? It's the idea of a bar graph. You're able to make those comparisons. All right, so bar graphs. Again, if you were doing them, you want to be between the lines. I'm going to illustrate that for you in a moment when we look at our next graph. Even though it's not a bar graph, I'll help you to understand what to do when we get to that point. Okay, let's look at our second graph here. This is a broken line graph. A broken line graph. And they're used to show changes in the value of the data. But the key there is changes. Stock market prices are usually on a broken line graph because you have ups and downs. And that's really when you would use a broken line graph, when data goes up and goes down. So that's what we've got here. And so let's take a look and analyze this broken line graph. Um, Notice we have a descriptive title, potatoes consumed, all right? Where and what, we don't know, but there are potatoes consumed. We're not labeled with days of the week down below, but everybody knows Monday through Sunday would be days of the week. And then off to the left-hand side scale, we have kilos. And so you can see the labeling of the kilos. All right, notice a couple things on a broken line graph. Notice that the word Monday is right centered with the middle of that line. That's what you want. The line is Monday, and that dot is Monday. So how many potatoes were consumed on Monday? 15 kilos. 15 kilos of potatoes consumed on Monday. Again, this line right here is Tuesday. You would not write the word Tuesday in between the blocks. That would be improper. That's not what it is. The line itself is Tuesday. So that dot is Tuesday, 20 kilos. You can see Wednesday, we're up to 30. Thursday, I don't know. People don't like their potatoes on Thursday. We're down to 10. Again, back up, and finally the max there on Sunday at 35 kilos, a broken line graph. Let me get you to notice a few other things here as I get rid of these marks. Notice that the first dot is not right on this border line. You don't want it there. You want the border, and then the first line in is the first dot. Now, you should have even spaces between each of your bars, or each of your lines, I'm sorry. And notice we have even spaces. That's important. All right. A dot goes for each piece of data, and then you really are connecting the dots with your lines. Right? You're just simply connecting your dots. So the way you would make a broken line graph is you would plot the dots, and then you would draw the line between. Notice again, the last dot ends before the border. Notice also that we have some space above, and we have a little space below. That's good. Notice also, though, that the scale is such to where we can clearly see the ups and downs. We can clearly see the ups and downs. That's important. If your data point is too great, then you won't be able to see the ups and downs. And it just depends on how much it changes. The more change, then the bigger the numbers between the lines. But if we would have only had a minimal change, maybe this would have been, maybe this had to be a 2 and 4 and 6 and 8. Remember, keep your scale uniform, 10 and 12, etc. If the data would have been less of a change, so that you can clearly see the change on your graph. Sometimes also you won't start with 0. Let's suppose you have a stock and there's only minimal change in your stock. And let's say your stock changes within one whole dollar. Maybe the stock started out at $40 and it goes up to 41 and it stays between 40 and $41. Well, how would you do your scale? Well, you got to be careful here. I might go $38 here. I might be 39 here, 40 here, right? 41 here, so that I'm showing the data change. It just depends upon what the situation is. I might even go more and maybe go a quarter for each line so that I can clearly show the ups and downs. And notice I didn't start with 0 on this one. Sometimes you'll have to do that, because if you start at 0 and you're trying to show the change in data, then that wouldn't work. For example, how about something like Apple stock? I don't know what Apple stock is currently going for, but I think it was around $600 or something. So if you started at 0 and the change is between, let's say, $590 and $610, you wouldn't see any change. You got to start higher. All right, those are aspects of the broken line graph. And so be careful there. Now, let me take a moment to go back to a bar graph. Do your bar graphs on graph paper. Now, the difference here in a bar graph, the word Monday would go between the two lines. And Monday was 15, right? So your first bar would be right here. And you would fill that in, and you would put a 15 on the top. Again, with a bar graph, technically you're going to skip your line, and you're going to go to your next bar. Tuesday would be in here. What's Tuesday's data? 20. So I'd be up to 20. And here would be my bar. And again, my 20 would go here. All right, Wednesday. What was Wednesday? Wednesday was 30. So again, Wednesday, skip a bar, go up to 30. Right there. Fill your bar in 30 and keep going until you get to Sunday. And again, leave one more block to the right and make your border. You're doing this on graph paper. Make your border for your bar graph. Okay, make your border for your broken line graph. Same thing. You want to show a border. You want your title up above, again, clearly labeled. Okay, broken line graph. Here's one more down below. Now this one, you notice something missing? There is no title on this thing. So I don't know whose graph this is. I'm assuming this is savings accounts. I don't know whose it is. I don't know what it is. I know I got Jack and Barbara. Again, that's usually from program. So this has two broken lines on one graph. And there can be more than two. Again, we have months down below, and we've got savings, US dollars. So at least we know we're in dollars this time, and you can see the changes in the data. Again, this broken line graph really should have vertical lines. So there should have been a vertical line right there, a vertical line there, a vertical line there, a vertical line there, and a vertical line there. Again, notice the words for a broken line graph centered on the line. That should be centered on the line, centered on the line, centered on the line, centered on the line. Okay? So broken line graphs. Pay attention to detail. That's the key here, and you want to be detail oriented. One day, if you're giving a presentation in a company or at the Pentagon or whatever, you want to be able to use graphs in a proper way. Okay, so what else? Well, next come pie charts. Pie charts. All right, so number 4, pie charts, pie graphs. Um, what are they? Some call them circle graphs. They are used to show how the data is separated into sections. How the data is separated into sections. Very useful in budgets or money type situations. Anything where you have a total and you want to see how the total is broken up into pieces. How is that total broken up? So the whole pie is the total, and then you're showing the pieces. All right, we do have a title here, customer satisfaction. I don't know what the product is. I don't know what the situation was. I would have included that so that, again, anybody looking at my pie chart would know immediately what they're satisfied about or dissatisfied about. In this one, it's a percent pie chart. Doesn't have to be a percent. My two examples are percents. We'll make one that's not a percent. But notice here, you can clearly see that by far, most people were dissatisfied and very dissatisfied. 50% were very dissatisfied. That's not good. And then you go with, you know, very satisfied, only 9%, somewhat satisfied, 14%. Somewhat dissatisfied, 27%. This, whatever this was, it was not good because a total of 77% were dissatisfied. Okay, at least somewhat to very dissatisfied. But the pie chart tells you the breakdown of that information. Notice inside the chart, we do have a label telling you what it is. And in these cases, the data was in percents, so it showed you 50%. The data was already in percents, and so it showed you 50%. Let's go down to our second example here. This is a President's proposed total spending fiscal year 2014. And so you can see now this pie chart is quite a lot larger. There's a lot more slices. But again, at a quick glance, you can get a good idea of what's going on. Now, technically, this data would be inside the pie chart, but the pie chart is, there's so many slices that the only way to really effectively show the data was to do it outside. But again, in these bigger slices, it could have been inside. Look, military, 17% of the budget. Medicare and health, 25%. Unemployment, Social Security, 33%. You can see all the other pieces there of the pie, right? That's the idea. How much do you get? Science here, 1%. And you get an idea. Education, 2% of the budget. All right? President's proposed total spending fiscal year 2014. All right, let's get into making the actual pie chart. All right, so how do you make a pie chart? Well, excuse me, to make a pie chart, you must determine the number of degrees of each piece, right, of the pie. Well, there's a formula, and it's pretty simplistic. All you do is you take the piece of data, the data that you're considering, you have to divide it, grab your green here, by the total of the data, and then multiply times 360 degrees. This is going to tell you how many degrees to make the slice of your pie. Oh, by the way, we're going to need a protractor. All right, so hopefully I have reminded you in class today to have a protractor, and so you're going to need a protractor to do this. All right, and then notice here, round to the nearest degree. All right, I know we round everything to the 10th, right, to one decimal place, but you can't make a tenth of a degree with your protractor. So just round off to the nearest degree. All right, round off to the nearest degree. All right, what else? Use a compass to draw the circle. Don't be drawing the circle freehand. Use a compass. As I've said many times already, use a descriptive title. Use a protractor to measure the size of each piece of the pie, and then label each section. Label each section. Okay, so let's finish off with this example. So F says, make a pie chart, circle graph of the Smith family monthly budget items. All right, and so here's our data. Mortgage, 1,600. Tithes and offerings, 600. Utilities, 400. Other, 1,400. And I have to begin to I have to determine how big to make each slice of pie. So first thing is I need a total of the data. So just take out your calculator and total up 1,600 plus 600 plus 400 plus 1,400. And when you total up that data, we get $4,000. Okay, so that's the total of the data. All right, so I'm going to go to blue here, and I'm going to start figuring out my slices. I'm going to take the mortgage first. The mortgage. All right, so again, take a look at the formula at the top of the page. Take your piece of data. What's our mortgage? 1,600. Divide it by the total. What's our total? 4,000. Multiply it by 360 degrees. Okay, so we take our 1,600, we divide it by our 4,000, and then don't forget we have to multiply that times 360 degrees. All right, when you are done, you get 144 degrees. 1,600 divided by 4,000, I usually hit equal or total, then multiply by 360. And that's 144 degrees. So let's finish this off, and then we'll start putting them in. I'm going to use a color change here. I'm going to go to black. And the next is tithes and offerings. I'm just going to abbreviate here. Tithes and offerings. So again, how would you figure it out? Pause the video if you want to figure it out on your own. So 600 divided by the 4,000 times 360 degrees. And we end up at 54 degrees. All right, I'm going to use green for my third one. Utilities, I'm just going with the U. 400 divided by 4,000 times 360. And that one is 36 degrees. Now, if I'm accurate, I don't have to do my last piece, because whatever's left will be the last piece. The number of degrees remaining will be the last piece. Okay, let's get ready to do our pie chart. Now, for me, I want the title first off. That's what I want first off. So I'm going to put Smith family monthly budget. Nice descriptive title right off the bat. Okay, that's how you'd start. I'm going to take my ruler here. I'm going to line it up with the center of the circle. By the way, if you used a protractor, you made a hole in your paper. I would take your pencil and make sure that that hole is clear. you need to use the center of the circle. All right, and so I'm going to take my ruler and I'm going to draw a line from the center of the circle out to the circle to the right. This is the way I like to do my bar graphs or my pie charts. Okay, so that's one side of my 144-degree angle. If you look up, oh, that's not what I wanted to move. Okay, so if you look up, what I did here is I am dealing with my 144 degrees for my mortgage right now. All right, I'm going to take my protractor and I'm going to line it up, right, along the line with the center. Hopefully you know how to use your protractor. That's something you should have learned in elementary school. Okay, and I need 144 degrees, so start at 0. I'm reading this inside scale right here, right, because I have to start at 0. Where my line is 0. So there's two scales. Don't let that confuse you. I'm starting at 0, and I'm going to follow it around until I get to 144. Now I have to mark outside, and so I'm just going to put a mark at 144. It's right there. Okay, 144 degrees. Now for me, this is a pain with the electronics. I got to get my ruler here, and I have to spin my ruler 144 degrees. So I can line up and draw my line. Okay, so again, you line up your center point with the point on the line. That's close enough. A little bit hard doing it digitally. So you take that and you draw your line. And I like to right away go ahead and finish off this section. So to finish off this section, we need to label it. This is mortgage. And we need to put the data amount. So how much was the data? $1,600. Don't put 144 degrees in there. Put the amount of the data. Right, $1,600. Okay, now I need to do a 54-degree angle. Watch what I do here. So I'm going to take my compass again. Only this time I need to swing it around to line up with that line right there, because I need my angle to go from there. You see that? All right, so now take my black here, and I need to go 54 degrees. Again, I'm reading from 0, right? See the zeros on the inside? So I'm reading from 0, 50, 1, 2, 3, 4 is right there. Again, I'm going to move this out of the way. I'm going to grab my ruler. And now again, I need to spin this. This is really a pain doing this with this kind of, normally you just grab your ruler and you're drawing, right? And away you go, and it's just quick and easy. But I have to keep playing with it to get the ruler in the right spot at the right angle. About like that. All right, close enough for government work for digital. So again, you draw your line. Okay, there's my next pie section. Again, I'm going to label it. What is this? This is tithes and offerings. Again, do not put the number of degrees in there. I just put the number of degrees in there. Put the amount of the data. No, come back. All right, so we're going to put in here the amount of the data. All right, we'll get this thing going. And our data was $600. Okay, got to do 36 degrees. So again, take your protractor. And again, it's got to be spun. You're going to line it up along that line. Again, start reading 0. I need to go 36. 30, 35, 36 is right there. All right, off with my protractor, in with my ruler. And again, I've got to spin my ruler. Not there yet. Again, this would be so much easier with a normal ruler. On paper, you'd be done already, but electronically, it's a bit of a pain. Okay. I don't need my ruler anymore. Let's see if I can get to my X out. I don't need my protractor anymore. Okay. So let's finish up. Let me grab my green. All right, and with this slice of pie was utilities. Again, write that in nicely. Utilities, what was the amount? $400. And then our last slice of pie is what's left, and this is other. All the other aspects of your budget, savings, etc. Items that you have to budget money for monthly and set aside. Groceries, all those things, $1,400. And there's your pie chart. Notice we've got a descriptive title. We have properly figured out the number of degrees of each slice of pie. We can look at this and see that clearly the mortgage takes most of the money. Other takes a good amount. Tithes and offerings is that slice. Utilities, the other slice. And there you have it. All right, so that's the lesson. And so how did we start? We started off with a bar graph, And so a couple of examples of our bar graphs. From there, we went to a broken line graph. A couple examples there. Remember the aspects that I mentioned to you. Pay attention to detail. And then finally, we ended up at pie charts and figuring out how to figure up the data. That's the lesson. All right, have a great night.